33rd Annual Economic Outlook Seminar conducted by the Bureau of Business and Economic Research. My name is Chuck Keegan. I'm a research professor and recently retired Director of Forest Industry Research at the Bureau, and I'm going to be moderating today's program. We're extremely pleased as we start today with a formal welcome to have with us the Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs for the University of Montana, Missoula. I'd like to introduce Royce Angstrom. Royce?
Thank you very much, Chuck. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be with you today. This is quite an exciting event. For me, this is my first year in the state of Montana, and so as part of my education here, I've been reading quite a bit of the history of the state, and it's been intriguing to learn about how the economy of the state of Montana has developed over the years and the diversity of that economy. So I'm really looking forward to today's event and learning more about the economic outlook as we go forward in the next few years of the state. It's great to see such a diverse audience here. I see people from not only higher education and certainly in a cooperative mode of higher education, people from other institutions as well as the University of Montana, but members of the Board of Regents and state policymakers, many members from the business sector. So it's great to see so many different folks here interested in looking at the economic outlook for our state as well. As Chuck mentioned, this is the 33rd consecutive offering of this Economic Outlook seminar, and that in itself is a very impressive thing to have that level of dedicated and continuous service from the folks at the Bureau. So I really appreciate that very much. This is a great service to the state, as all of us are in critical need of knowledge about the economy and the factors that affect it as we move forward. This year's theme, investing in a competitive educated workforce, is of course especially important to us in higher education, but important to all of us in the state, as every individual who goes on to higher education and proceeds through the educational world increases his or her lifetime earnings and quality of life in a very significant and important way. And higher education and education in general is so important to the development of our state's economy. As you look around the country and see those states that have invested heavily in education, the important benefits to their economy of that investment. So it's very appropriate that we address this topic today, and I'm looking forward to that. I want to especially recognize Commissioner Stearns for being here this morning and giving us our keynote lecture. Commissioner, will appreciate your help a great deal and look forward to what you have to say. Looking forward to a great program. Thanks to all of the folks in the Bureau, Chuck, for your leadership here, Paul Polson and Dean Gayanchetta for making this possible. Thanks for being here, and thank you all for putting this on. Enjoy the day.
Thank you very much for the start, Royce, and I'm sure the information you will find educational and informative. By way of some further introduction this morning, let me give you a bit more background about our Bureau for those of you who may not be familiar with us. The Bureau of Business and Economic Research is the research arm of the University of Montana's School of Business Administration. The Bureau was begun in 1948 and since then has been involved in a wide variety of activities, including economic analysis, forecasting, and survey research, and obviously what we're about today, information dissemination. We also publish the Montana Business Quarterly, to which many of you now subscribe, and I'll point out some additional information on our Bureau on the inside of your program folder, and we would invite you to contact us if we can be of any assistance to you or to your organization. Well, as you see, we have a number of sponsors for our Outlook seminars this year, and I would like to recognize them. I'd like to recognize Northwestern Energy, BNSF, the Montana State Fund, and First Interstate Bank of Missoula. And I'd just like to say that their sponsorship is one of the main reasons that we're able to bring this series of economic outlook seminars around the state of Montana, and we greatly appreciate their support. Bear with me, but we have a long list of organizations that have approved our Outlook seminars for continuing education credit, and I'd like to go through that list to recognize those organizations and to make you aware of the opportunity for continuing education credit. We're pleased that the Montana Society of Certified Public Accountants, the Institute of Certified Management Accountants, the Society of American Foresters, the Montana Department of Education Teacher Professional Renewal Units Program, the Montana Board of Real Estate Appraisers, the Montana Board of Realty Regulation, the Montana Insurance Continuing Education Program, and the Montana Board of Social Work Examiners and Professional Counselors, and the Montana Board of Nursing Home Administrators have all approved our programs for continuing education credit. It's possible we will have your certificates if you pre-registered by the time you leave here today at noon. If you don't get a certificate today, they should be mailed to you within about a month, and if you haven't received them within a month, give us a call and we'll make sure that you get one. Well, as usual, our program today is going to examine the Montana economy, local economies within Montana, and major industry sectors in the Montana economy. And as usual, we've allowed time for questions after each of our presentations. So we would appreciate it if you would hold your questions and comments until that time. We want to begin this morning, however, focusing on what is perhaps the number one issue among businesses in Montana, and that issue is a quality workforce. Specifically, we want to look at developing and sustaining the educated workforce that Montana businesses need to remain competitive and to grow. And of course, the Montana education system is a key element in doing this, and to talk to us about investing in a quality workforce, we are extremely pleased to have with us the Commissioner of Higher Education for the Montana University System. Would you please welcome Sheila Stearns?
Most people who speak at these podia are taller than I am, so I take control of that. Welcome and good morning. Nice to see such a turnout on a very cold morning in Missoula, Montana, a place that I consider one of my two hometowns. It's sort of funny to think that I'm up here talking about a real basic economic need and engine and driver, and that is of course, an educated workforce, but I will tell you why I wish that my dad could be here, who brought my twin brother and me from Glendive to college here at the university in 1964. And he was a conservative Scottish dentist who really thought that anytime we had any spare money at all, we should use it to buy new tires. Something like that, nothing frivolous. And he thought that I should be a pharmacist or something really practical and not an English major or a history major, which I turned out to be. But someone asked him what my twin brother Pete was going to major in when we got to the university, and he said with a very kind of despondent voice, economics. At least he thought with English and history that maybe I could become a teacher, which of course I did do. But he was a wry fellow, and he said when the person asked him, "What will he do with economics?" This is a totally true story. And my dad said, "I don't know, maybe open an economics store." Totally true story. So I kind of wish my brother Pete could be here today too. Pete did major in economics, and his first job, his first year out of college, was with a young assistant professor at the University of Montana named Paul Polzin in 1969. And Pete went on then to get his master's degree and other degrees relating to that field, and has stayed in it and loved it and done very well. I think my dad would be proud. But he would be very surprised to see his English and history major daughter standing right here. The theme of this, the Ice Age, comes from tours I've taken around Montana for the last few years about the obviousness of the intersection of business, government, labor, industry, education to promote and develop a really competitive workforce for a state. And what we do in higher education is to really aggressively enter this intersection in a lot of ways, starting from offering certificates, and some of those I'll talk about, for high-paying jobs, to in the construction trades, to PhDs in biotechnology, just as examples. So with the first slide, when I give a title of something, Ice Age, and then my very first statement is that Montana's economy is hot, you might think there's a little contradiction there, but it'll all connect. Montana's economy is hot right now, and that, of course, is one of the reasons that we are challenged to find competitive workers. The unemployment rates in Montana have been very low, 3.6% currently, but as low last May as for 1 month they were down to 2%, which was astonishing. We were toggling there as lowest in the nation with Idaho. Montana has the 8th, measured in 2006, the 8th highest GDP growth rate. It had the 6th highest non-farm wage and salary job growth rate in the country. It had the 11th highest growth rate in annual average wage per job. And if there's anything I've heard in my 5 years as commissioner, it is what can we do in education to help the average wages increase across the state, because it's not just enough to have unemployment. You want those folks who are employed to have the good wages that support a strong economy. So related to that, I saw a friend here, Rick Burkhalter, who's on the state chamber with me, and last summer, to give you an example of kind of what we talk about around the table when we meet with business leaders, just as an example, and labor and industry leaders, we do a Big Sky roundup, and everybody from every corner of the state, all these employers were talking about how hard it was to attract competitive workers. And I gave an example of working with your local or nearest college or university to help with that. By partnering, we could help attract workers by perhaps giving some incentives toward education, progressing in your educational career. And someone came up to me afterward, a lady who said, "Have you heard of Master Lube in Billings?" And I had not at that time, and I said, "Tell me about it." And since then, I have talked to the folks at Master Lube in Billings, and I think it's a great example, even though the university system is not at least hugely involved. And what Master Lube does at this intersection of competition, investment, and education is really pretty interesting. What they do, and started 25 years ago, is recruit what I called, after I heard the owner describe it, they recruit from the school of hard knocks, all kinds of people who come in, and then they invest in those workers. These are just, at a Master Lube. They themselves say these are grease monkeys. But they set aside an education room in one of their 4 sites around the Billings area, and they spend up to a half a day a week, and they give these individuals who are working for them, the first thing they do is give them time to write down what are your 5-year career plans, what are your hopes, dreams, futures, and how can we help you achieve those. So they do not just think of them as people working in the lube business. And what happens with that investment is that they help them along the path, and how that connects to education, it's education in itself. They help them develop 5-year career plans. If they need it, GED completion, go to college part-time. And one of the things, and this is what I love to hear, for those students who are going part-time to MSU Billings, they won't pay tuition, but they pay another, many of you know this, big expense, they'll pay for the cost of the textbooks. They'll do little things that invest in the education of their workers. What do they get in return for that investment? They get, number one, they don't have a workforce shortage. They don't have to advertise. They may put a little thing up on the window, but basically word of mouth, if someone's leaving, says, ooh, that's a place you want to work. They'll invest in your education and in your future. What they also get is 3 years on average of very loyal, dedicated workers with a lot of esprit de corps. And then when those individuals go on to something on that career path, they have a wall of fame in each one of their master lube sites. And if somebody had in their career plan to go on to the military or go on to MSU Billings because they got a part-time start or the College of Technology, then their picture and recognition goes on the wall of fame. That is just a great example of the intersection of the ICE economy: investing, competing, educating. Now, Montana is attracting a young workforce. This is also good news. We have, a lot of people don't realize this, we have net migration. Flow of population moving in and out of Montana has changed in recent years. If you look up there, you'll see that in 2000, we had a net export of young people between the ages of 20 and 34 of over 2,000. And what you'll see that has happened by 2005 is that we have a net migration, in migration. Pretty dramatic, 4,500 students. And you may look at that and think, why the 20 to 34 and the 22 to 34? Did they, are those statisticians manipulating things to get a better outcome? And what happens is our data sources, change their methodology between that time. That's what they always say, I know, but it's true. The outcome is pretty darn close, and in the future they now use 22 to 34. And the underlying data, of course, is Census Bureau data. But the basic fact, even if it weren't so dramatic, the trend is that Montana's doing a good thing now in having more of a migration of young people coming in. And lastly, that native Montanans are returning home. That's a little part of that. We know that that has been part of the governor's agenda, is to travel around and to court expatriates, to talk to our young alumni who've moved away, to talk to alumni who have established great businesses in other parts of the country, and to have them come back as high-wage employers. And I promised myself that when I got to this, native Montanans are returning home, that I would introduce two individuals who work in the Office of the Commissioner of Higher Education and really work on behalf of the whole Montana university system, who are two outstanding and highly educated Montanans who've returned home. We've recruited them. I'd like them to stand and be introduced. One is Tyler Trevor, Associate Commissioner, and also Dr. Brad Eldridge, economist. I know these guys look like they're 25, but I think they're at least 35. But at any rate, they're the kind of sharp young folks that you do hope return to Montana after they, as Brad did, get their PhDs at SUNY Buffalo in economics, or Tyler, his advanced degrees. He's a Bobcat. His undergrad was from MSU, and his advanced degrees in California. And we stole him from the Nevada higher education system, and a real expert in helping to pull together the kind of data that Regent Christian, that you and the fellow board members need to make, and that we need collectively to make good decisions. So Montanans are returning home. And here's another thing. Montana, contrary, I think, to some conventional wisdom, is really producing graduates. And this is something that we probably don't fly our flag as well or as high as we should. I'd like you to look at this for a moment. The ratio of degrees awarded to the number of students enrolled in 2005, and that is for every 100 undergraduates enrolled. Montana is, by the way, is on this chart twice, and I'll tell you why in a second, but it's on there as the number 2 with that 14, second only to Vermont in the proportion of baccalaureate degrees it produces for every 100 students enrolled. And I'll bet you there are people in this room who are thinking, that's not really kind of what I thought. And maybe you're thinking, why hasn't my kid got that baccalaureate degree? One of those. If we include all the enrollment for 2 years in there as well, we're still pretty darn high. I mean, one of the reasons we're high is that we have a fairly truncated 2-year enrollment in 2-year educational institutions. But we're high either way. So that is a real bragging point for the state of Montana, and it bodes well in investment, competition, education, addressing workforce needs. So now let me give you another example of Montana, the university system, in partnership with labor, with industry, with the legislature, with the governor, and with a college, addressing this workforce shortage. At Miles Community College last year, they came up with the idea because industry approached them, particularly one called Ofdahl & Sons, and some other businesses that were really desperate for some individuals who were well-trained and had certificates in heavy equipment operation. Jobs that pay at least $40,000 to start, and often 50 to 60 or higher. Why did I become a teacher? So you begin to wonder. But here's how the partnership worked. Industry approached the college with the need, the idea, and now they offer the practicum sites and the big heavy equipment, which of course the college could not afford. What Miles Community College did at this sort of intersection of education, investment, competition, also cooperation, was to provide the curriculum, help develop it, look at model curricula from other places, and the faculty. And what the state of Montana did was to help invest in, it wasn't a lot, a little bit in the program budget for Miles to be able to do that. So with that cooperation, they are able to develop a workforce shortage out in eastern Montana, kind of one occupation at a time. So everyone are winners. Here's another example. Nursing graduates are in high demand throughout the state. I learned that on a tour of hospitals and healthcare centers about 1.5 years ago. The good news is that we are working hard to meet the demand, and that if you look at that third column, well, it's got a little kind of background, might make it a little hard to see, but 73% of the registered nurses that we educate get jobs in state at an average annual wage of $43,000, $44,000. And licensed practical nurses, also a little over 3/4 of them get jobs the next year in their field for nearly $27,000. That's a good story to tell. And a good example is in Lewistown, where for the last 12 to 15 years, a group called the EOCM, Educational Opportunities for Central Montana, got themselves together and cooperated with MSU Northern to educate nurses close to home in Lewistown. They deliver the program, and as a result, maybe no surprise, one of the only, and perhaps the only, hospital that I visited that is not experiencing a nursing workforce shortage is Central Montana Community Medical Center, because of what is being offered in cooperation with MSU Northern right there in Lewistown. Can-do leadership made the difference there. Along with the, we're investing in a competitive workforce. Back one, they've got a pie chart someplace. I'm not sure if it disappeared. There was my pie chart. Investing in the workforce, I mentioned that it takes a governor, and it takes a legislature, and it takes lobbyists from industry and labor. But in the last session, we put in, from match, from industry, non-state sources, $6.4 million, and the MUS, through the largesse of the legislature and the wisdom, if you will, put in $5.5 million and spread it around those areas that we knew had definite workforce shortages. You can see there, those of you who represent labor, you can see we have invested in the construction trades. Maybe it might be equipment here in Missoula. It might be a purchase of a backhoe or a wheel loader or crawler dozer, whatever that is, in Missoula's College of Technology or in healthcare professions here. Up in Flathead Valley, we invested in, they used the funds to get some of the welding and metal fabrication materials they needed. Excuse me, that was in Great Falls, or in electronics for Northern or for Flathead. Another example, next slide, is with the Northwest Energy, one of our sponsors. Thank you, Northwest Energy. Let's see. The Montana Tech COT lineman program as a picture. And what happened there, as we're finding the slide, is that, am I following it up?
No, it's the clicker.
Back one. It's okay. Well, because of the next one, just keep it right there at Printing for Less, because I'll come back to them. And then I may have to figure out how to run this myself. That's a scary thought. But another example of a public-private partnership is the Northwestern Energy working with the COT in Butte to develop a utility line program. And what they did was to say, you know, how do we do this? We need these individuals with certificates, and it's an industry that's just crying for these. And what happened is that they pulled together, governor's office, state workforce investment board, everyone, labor, big part of the negotiations for that, and pulled it all together. And they are now, the first class finished up in 2007, and somewhere deep in this mysterious computer is a picture that I thought was kind of cool, because it shows several of the people who finished that program in December holding their babies. And the good news for that is that those kids will grow up with families with good, high-paying jobs. Oh, there they are. You'll see a tall guy right in the middle, too, who did not just finish his lineman program. He's got another job in the state of Montana. Good job, as a matter of fact. Now, if all goes well, we can go on to Printing for Less. Yes, this is going well now. Printing for Less is a company that I heard of, first of all, when I talked to Evan Barrett, the state's chief business development officer, about it, but also a vice president who sat next to me in a meeting and was telling me about this company that calls itself America's Print Shop, and how they worked with the state, with higher education, how a lot of its high-paying workforce, now up to 200, based in Livingston, are MSU or UM or Billings graduates from all over the state. And they did benefit with a grant from the Montana's New Worker Training Fund. And that sort of what at least the economist in my office calls a virtuous cycle. Chuck, have you ever heard the phrase virtuous cycle as opposed to, you've heard of virtuous and you've heard of cycle? Okay, I don't know. At any rate, a virtuous cycle, of course, is a good thing, and apparently is the opposite of the vicious cycle, and that is this investment that Printing for Less is doing in people, educated people. And the friend who sat next to me, their vice president, said, we really look at their educational qualifications and their teamwork skills and so forth. A couple of other aspects to this nexus between investment, competition, and education. I mentioned some good news about we are growing our wages, but they're still low. And here's a problem, and that is that Montana, of the 15 western states that we work together with in a compact, we have the lowest difference in median earnings between a high school diploma and an associate degree. If we're going to have professionals and attract the kind of businesses that want a highly educated workforce, we have to make it worth our while, slowly but surely, for that differential to grow. Because otherwise, unless a master lube makes the encouragement there, people will not see it as worth their long-term future, worth their while, to continue their education. In nursing, I'll go to teachers next. Teachers are obviously an area of professional service in this state. Pretty good in Billings, also in Helena, not so bad in Missoula in terms of average, not great. But the problem I wanted to point out was that for us to have the economy thrive in eastern Montana, outside the boot, we have to make sure that their nurses and their teachers, whom we are educating, and frankly, at least at this point, we're not really giving them a tuition break if they say they're going to work in Glendive. So if their average starting salary is still 31, 32, or that's not starting, their average salary is 32,000, not quite enough. So we still need to do a little more investment in Montana. A couple of areas where Montana could really improve for our economic development is in graduate education. And this shows, again with those 15 western states, that Montana is only above Alaska in the percentage of students enrolled in graduate programs in Montana. Now you might think, well, is that so bad if you have a lot of people in those certificate programs? It is not the greatest thing for your state. It can really, enliven the state if you're moving along. And the regional average is to have 12% of your enrollment in graduate education. There are graduate students do foster innovation and creativity. A good example is Rob Bargatze in the Bozeman area, who founded Ligosite. He earned a PhD in 1994 from MSU and founded a company, high-tech company that now employs 50 or so people. We can and should do more of that. Another one on research and development. It is growing in Montana. It is, back in 1998, we had our colleges and universities were bringing in about $76 million in research and development dollars. It is projected to go perhaps well over $200 million by 2010 if we stay on the trajectory that we're on, and we should. That should be a goal. It does have good impact and fallout for just sort of like rain across all of our fields in terms of startup companies. To give you a couple of examples that have started from graduate students or their professors working together, MPA Technology in Montana that emphasizes cancer treatment, Phillips Environmental, waste sanitation, Ligosite Pharmaceuticals and vaccine, an aspect of vaccine production, Montana Molecular in cell biology research, and Montana Microbial Products, plant disease treatment. All of those are new, high-wage, high-tech kind of companies that are giving jobs to our young people we want to keep at home. So we want more of that. It's part of that invest, because some of what gave them their start was some investment. My final slide is that the Board of Regents for the Montana University System has a strategic plan that has maybe three sort of fundamental foundations. The second one, goal 2, is to assist in the expansion and improvement of the state's economy through the development of high-value jobs and the diversification of the economic base. The university system is not an ivory tower. We have just 3 overarching goals. That's number 2. Number 1 is affordability and accessibility to get students into college who are qualified. And the third one is to be as efficient and effective as we can possibly be. And some of the strategies for this goal are ones that you would expect. Promote distance education and dual enrollment for people scattered all over the state. Increase opportunities for non-traditional students, and so forth. So, in closing, I'd like to say that the state of Montana, just like individuals, can be prepared for regional and national and international competition by investing in an educated workforce. It has to be creative in ways to do that, in the way that, whether it's Master Lube or Miles Community College or EOCM in Lewistown, or many countless ways that I probably didn't mention that occur right here in University of Montana, Missoula. The evidence is clear that this is succeeding in many Montana companies. We know, and we can name names, that enterprising executives are reaching out to colleges and universities to create productive, successful educational partnerships every corner of the state, and that the surest, the surest way to increase workforce supply and to enhance Montana's hot economy, to keep that going, is through what I call the Ice Age philosophy, and repeating that virtuous cycle over and over of invest, educate, compete, invest, in any order. I put it in the order of educate, compete, invest because it made that nice little word ICE. But really, it's any order, and it'll keep the circle going for a stronger Montana. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sheila. I'm sure Sheila will take questions. Are there some questions or comments? Questions, comments? Must be. I know Sheila covered it very thoroughly, but there must be some comments or a question. Yes? Joe.
I'm particularly interested in the graduate education slide that you showed, and could you just talk a little bit about some of the discussion going on within the Board of Regents?
The question relates to some of the discussion going on among the Board of Regents related to graduate education in the university system.
Thank you. That was from Provost Engstrom. And there are discussions in the university system from President Dennison, President Gamble, presenting good information to the Board of Regents about that investment in graduate enrollment. And so just a couple of examples of initiatives that they've put forward for consideration by the legislature, by the governor, is to, for example, if we want to get our share of research students, we have to compete for them. To compete for them, we have to be competitive in giving them stipends. We may have to waive non-resident tuition, probably should. That would take a little bit of backfill. You know that very well from your budget. I know exactly where your question came from, Royce. It's not just self-serving for the University of Montana. It is self-serving for the state of Montana. You cannot compete with Colorado, much less the Research Triangle in North Carolina, if you cannot give competitive stipends and waive non-resident tuition for high-quality research students. So those are just two examples, which you're probably somewhat aware of, Royce, of things that we're hoping to, investing in graduate students is just not necessarily on the highest list of any legislator, unless we are able to make the case that oftentimes those graduate students become little economic engines. So that's what we're working on.
Other questions, comments for Sheila? Yes.
You started out in saying that the economy was hot at the very beginning. But then at the very end, you said that Montana has one of the lowest salaries in the 13 states. How can we start to move that? And it seems like it's kind of a nationalized state as far as how can we have one with the other?
If I can try to paraphrase seemingly contradictory situation in Montana, where we have very low unemployment and a seemingly hot economy, but very low wages for our workers. And how can we accelerate or initiate a faster growth in wages? Is that?
Brad, good to see you again. Thanks for that question, because really they're not inconsistent. If you remember, the first thing I said was that Montana, one of the first things, has the 6th highest wage and salary job growth, and the 11th highest rate in annual average wage growth. Well, one of the reasons we can be that high in the growth is because we're starting from a low spot. Do you see what I mean? When we get up to where we should be, then that growth rate won't be so. So the signs are good that the fact that as I pointed out toward the end, that our wages are still too low. There are some good signs in the horizon that I mentioned first as part of the hot economy, that we are nudging those up. And the connection I'm trying to make from the beginning of my talk to the end is the way you can keep that trend going that I talked about in the first, slide and erase that fact at the end that the wages are low, is to invest in the education of our workers so that we attract more high wage employers in that cycle. So it sounds like it was contradictory. They actually, in a circle, connect.
Yes. One more.
Observation, we're a 50-person engineering firm located here in Missoula. We pay full tuition for our engineers to go back and get a graduate degree. So we are really trying to invest in that workforce, but we need help from the regions and the state of Montana.
Ovation. Free unpaid announcement. What is the name of your engineering firm? That's awesome. WGM? Great. That's exactly the example that we're trying to encourage.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sheila. I'm sorry, Sheila will be around and be glad to visit with you at the break or later in the day at some other time. I want to thank Sheila again for that terrific overview of some of the things that are going on within the university system. I guess now that I'm retired, I'm an unbiased, I have an unbiased opinion. I think the university is doing some terrific things, and you saw some of the opportunities that exist to develop that further.